Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A live stream. I'm sure we will have lots of questions about the last episode of House of the Dragon, but we're also open to questions about the world of Ice and Fire more broadly, Lord of the Rings, anything else that I cover on this channel. If you are watching live, then apologies for the slight delay to the start. Uh, there's a general election here in the UK, and the exit poll results were announced at 10 o'clock my time, which is when this normally starts. And I just wanted 5 minutes or so to digest that. So I'm sure you understand. No politics from me tonight. I know lots of people watch these wanting to be escaping from the real world, but sometimes you just want to know what's happening. What we will be talking about today is basically whatever you want to talk about. We have got a whole load, as is always the case, a whole load of questions from my patrons. I will try to get through as many questions as I can from the chat. Very broadly, I will try and start by talking about House of the Dragon, then we'll move on to A Song of Ice and Fire, then The Lord of the Rings, and then whatever you want after that. Did have a couple of super chats just before we went on air. Weirwood Net saying, my vote is when in doubt, vote Bloodraven. Thank you very much for that one. And Maura Lee, hi there, Maura, great to see you, saying for my fellow mods as well. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let's go to Maura Lee. Oh, very generous, Maura. Thank you so much. Saying in honor of Weirwood Trees and Magic and Alice Rivers. Yes, we'll definitely be talking a lot about Weirwood Trees, Magic, and Alice Rivers in this, as well as I suspect quite a lot of the rest of the season. Right, let's go straight into a question from Lady Mays Mormont saying, good evening, Robert. Good evening to you. Did you notice Laris Strong in the brothel scene of episode 3? Shortly after Aegon walks in, he walks past a man and a woman standing against the wall on the left, baring their heads. I'm wondering if Laris discovers information by planting himself in places that are known to hold secrets. For instance, I'm willing to believe Laris knows what Aemond said to the brothel madam last episode about regretting killing Luke. So this is a really interesting spot. I will have to say I didn't spot this when I was watching the episode. So if you didn't either, do not worry, this wasn't very obvious. And I will say I also had a very quick check back just before this, and I also didn't spot it again on my rewatch. But I believe it was there. I know lots of people did see this. He does also appear in the background one other time in this episode when Gwen Hightower, was it last episode, when Gwen Hightower appears and Alicent is there talking to him, and then Kristen Cole is saying, can I have your favour? If you look in the background, there's Laris Strong, just sort of like hanging out, keeping an eye on things. This isn't the first time that he's been sort of just lingering in the background. The very first episode that we were introduced to Laris Strong, if you remember, it was when there was that hunt. This is way back in season 1, and Viserys had that hunt. And he appears on the scene and he's like, oh, I can't, my poor foot, I can't possibly be a part of the hunt. Do you mind, ladies, if I just sort of sit here with you while you're talking? And they said, yes, of course, come and sit down. And then he says nothing else. And he just sits there while they're all, I suspect we're supposed to think they're gossiping. In reality, they're sharing information, knowledge about what's really going on behind the scenes at court. So this does seem to be part of Laris Strong's modus operandi, is just to be the person you don't really notice, be the person hiding in the background, picking up information. Now, the fact that he was there tells us that, yes, I think he probably knows that this is where Aemond goes. So yes, I think it's probably fair to say that he probably now has a bit more information about what Aemond wants. One of the things which is noticeable about how he works, Laris, is that he doesn't just give people bits of information. He tries to understand their motivations. He tries to understand what is it they want and what therefore might influence them. You see that when he's intervened early this season, late last season, it's been with Aegon just coming in and saying, oh, you really sure about having Otto as your Hand of the King? And that's really what one of the things which was grating on Aegon. Laris had been there again, just in the background, paying attention to that court scene when Aegon's there saying, "Yes, all you small folk, you can have whatever you want," and then Otto saying, "I don't think we can really allow that." Laris was there, and so Laris is coming in and just sort of like whispering a few things into his ear. Another time he's there, if you remember, he was whispering a few things into Otto's ear and saying, there's no reason why me gathering information has to be against you. Another time he's whispering information in Alicent's ear. And again, it's what do they want? And that's his way in. Scavelia saying, do you think Daemon's vision was caused by the Harrenhal curse, Weirwood magic, or Alice Rivers magic? Big question. I've got some questions about this. Let me see whether I can find them. I'll try and draw all of this together. Maybe I won't be able to find that. Anyway, let's answer this one here now. Daemon's vision. So he arrives in Harrenhal. Harrenhal, dark, spooky, but he's welcomed. He's welcomed there by Sir Simon Strong, and he spends the night. And then he hears the banging at the door. Who's there? No one's there. He goes walking out, and he sees young Rhaenyra sewing the head back on baby Jaehaerys and basically saying, who always has to pick up the pieces when you go? It's me. At which point, bang, he's now out in front of the Weirwood tree. And then Alice Rivers appears and says, you're going to die here. So what is this? What's going on? There's clearly something magical going on. Spoiler alert, by the way, in case you're new here, the rule on spoilers is book spoilers are fine. The books have been out for a while. Yes, the show tries to stick to the books, but not always 100%. So I will talk about what happens in the books. Show spoilers are not okay. I will happily talk about what happened in last episode and all the way back to the beginning of season 1, and also what happens in trailers and things like that. But any leaks? No, we do not cover them here. So the situation here is that she says you're going to die here, which is right. She is absolutely right. She's looking ahead probably 2 seasons worth. And Daemon will die there. The fact that he appears in front of the Weirwood tree, and by the way, just a quick shout out to the set designer. I've no idea who did the set design for Harrenhal, but I thought it was excellent. If you look at the set for the Weirwood tree in Harrenhal, and we'll talk about the history of Harrenhal in just 1 second, the tree itself is right out, jutting out into the sea, the God's Eye Lake, and its branches are all bending out into the lake towards the Isle of Faces, almost as if they're kind of rejecting the castle itself and reaching out towards the Isle of Faces, which is, as far as we're aware, the hub, the home of the Weirwood network. So the kind of design there I thought was really good. So we are supposed to see a connection here between what Daemon sees and kind of weirwoody magic, and also Alice Rivers. And Alice Rivers, I've got a video which will be coming out at some point in the next week or so about her. She is the most obviously magical person in this whole Dance of the Dragons. There are other people with kind of dragony visions and dreams. Helena, they've really emphasized here on House of the Dragon. But in terms of other kinds of magic, the most magical, obviously magical person is Alice Rivers. So the fact that she appears and she says, you're going to die here, we're supposed to take this seriously. The first part, however, Ryan Condal, the showrunner, has very clearly and specifically said that this is, he hasn't said it's Daemon's conscience exactly, but he said that this is going into back into sort of the deep recesses of Daemon's heart. What is it that is nagging at him? And clearly the breakdown in his relationship with Rhaenyra, that's why he's here. That's why he's here on his own. He hasn't got an army. In the book, he's got an army by this point, and he's there fully on behalf of Team Black. Here it's kind of vague exactly whose team he's on. Um, I don't think I've got a question on that. So I'm digressing from my digression here. But I said this in my breakdown video, but I think this is a deliberate thing on the writer's part, is that Simon Strong, the Castellan of Harrenhal, says, "My lord," and Damon immediately interrupts and says, "Your Grace." Now, he insists on being called Your Grace, and Your Grace is usually, not always, I'll come on to the caveat in a moment, usually what you call the king or queen. Sometimes it can also be close members of the royal family. So Damon saying you should call me Your Grace does not 100% mean that he's saying I'm actually here as king, but it's saying don't just treat me as a normal lord. I'm really quite high. And he follows that up by first of all talking about the presence of the crown here in the Riverlands, and Rhaenyra isn't there. He's the only member of House Targaryen there, which makes you go, so you're saying you're being the crown here? And then Simon Strong kind of gently pushes him and said, "What's the plan after you've done this?" And he says, "Well, we go to King's Landing and claim the throne." And again, the writing is deliberately vague. Did he mean for himself? Now, I suspect this is all just deliberately vague, just trying to make us wonder about Damon's intentions, given the discussion he had about with Rhaenyra just the previous episode. But this is very intentional, and there is a small chance that the writing team are wanting to make us think: is this guy about to make a bid for the Iron Throne himself? So that was my digression from the digression. In terms of the what's causing those visions, in my mind, the first part is something along to do with his Damon's conscience. This is what him working through what's in his mind and actually being presented with it, which isn't just him. It's been prompted by something. He's in a magical place, but the messaging there is something from him for him. The second bit, Alice Rivers telling him he's going to die here, that is her with her magic. And the thing which is over all of this is Harrenhal, and also this idea about the Weirwood network. Now, the history of Harrenhal is that weirwood trees, a grove of weirwood trees, was chopped down in order to build Harrenhal. The weirwood trees were included in the structure of Harrenhal, so everywhere people are walking, it's in the beams where they're walking, where they're eating, where they're sleeping. All of this has got weirwood around them. And then fundamentally, we have this curse of Harrenhal, which is it an actual curse? Is this the children of the forest cursing Harrenhal? Is this just it's a dark and dank place where lots of things happen? It's again left this kind of mystery. So I would say that we definitely have Damon's conscience. We definitely have the Weirwood network at play somewhere. We definitely have Alice Rivers doing some magic. But overall, Harrenhal should be mysterious. This is something that George R. R. Martin is very keen on with magic, is that we should not always be able to exactly understand or explain what's going on. If we can exactly understand or explain what's going on, then it's not mysterious. It's not scary enough. He wants magic to be scary. Chelsea Oliver saying, "Hi, Robert and Dan. I'd love to know if you think Ulf the White was telling the truth about Balon being his father. I think not, as I'm watching The Counting." Okay, don't tell me what's happening with The Counting. I will come back in to the UK election after this live stream. But Ulf White there was a lot, and I should probably say there was a lot of lore stuff happening in this episode. Previous episodes have had perhaps slightly more action. There's a lot of lore stuff for us to be just chewing over in this episode. Ulf White appears. He did appear. Yes, he was that guy. A few of us did spot him. He was the guy back in episode 2 who saw the rat catchers up on the wall. But here he comes, he basically introduces himself and he says that he is Balon the Brave's son. Now, that is Viserys and Daemon's dad. So he is Daemon Targaryen's half brother. In his estimation, Rhaenyra is his niece. Is this right? Well, I did do over on X, Twitter, I did do a little poll just to see what people thought, because I was interested in what people thought, and I gave the options as, you know, the question was, is he right? And the options I gave were yes, no, maybe, and pass the beer. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like 15% said yes. So the vast majority of people were not convinced by this story, which is probably fair given the way that he as a character is introduced on the TV show. He also doesn't look like a Targaryen, something that they acknowledged there on the TV show. But he is one of the dragon seeds. He's the third of the dragon seeds. We will get 4 dragon seeds. We hope we will get 4 dragon seeds appearing. So he is the third to appear, and he will, in the book at least, he will claim a dragon, which seems to imply probably that he has got some Targaryen ancestry in him. Now, is he right about Balon? Balon, we're told, so he was very, very happily married, as far as we can tell, very happily married. And then his wife died. And then after that, we're told that he didn't look at another woman, which sounds great. Is it possible that he then occasionally slunk down to the dodgier parts of Flea Bottom just for a little bit of recreation? Yes, I think it's possible. Can we see any kind of familial connection between Ulf and someone like, say, Daemon? Yes, I think we can. Charismatic, but also you kind of don't trust them. So there are hints there, and again, I think this is where we're going to be left with this: is that we will never be able to 100% say one way or the other. Is he? He claims to be Balon's son. He might be, but we couldn't be 100% sure. What will be interesting, though, is if he keeps up this line, eventually he will meet people like Daemon and be, oh, hi there, brother. And how will Daemon react to this? Because basically, in doing so, he's saying, yeah, so, your dad, he might not be as pure and wonderful as you first thought. How will Daemon react to that? We'll have to wait and see. Question from Scamelia saying mod love, and absolutely yes. So moderators, thank you so much for what you do. If you are watching this live and you're enjoying the chat, please do go and just say hi to people, but please also say thank you to the moderators. They are the people who make this such a wonderful community, because they are the people who protect from the occasional trolls which come not just here but absolutely everywhere, obviously on the internet, but also help people out with links and welcome new people in. So if you are watching this live, could you just give a little bit of love to the moderators? I would hugely appreciate it. And I will do a quick shout out actually to the moderators who I can just see in the chat. I know there are lots of moderators who aren't here, but Cull Carsnark, Agreed Weirwood, who else have I seen here? Lady Pushkins is around. I saw Maura Lee a little bit earlier. So thank you. I hugely appreciate it. But Scamelia says, do you think the Weirwood magic is more aggressive or darker in Harrenhal because of the Weirwoods destroyed in its construction? Yeah, that's certainly the implication. if I had to, and I mean, I did a history of Harrenhal video, which came out a couple of days ago. I didn't really touch on the curse in that, it has to be said. But if I had to say what I thought the curse was, it would be something along the lines of the Weirwood Network / the Children of the Forest / whoever on that side of things did not like the fact that weirwood trees were chopped down in that way, and B, did not want a castle, the biggest castle in Westeros, a hugely powerful family, right on the borders of the God's Eye Lake. Because in the middle of the God's Eye Lake is their safe harbour. That's their safe place, the Isle of Faces. And if you look at the map of Westeros, you'll see around the edges of it, yes, there's little fishing villages and lookout posts and things like that. But there aren't any massive cities, huge castles. Creating Harrenhal there would have changed that. Harrenhal had the potential to be, I mean, it was in pure size the biggest castle in Westeros, but because it was ruined so quickly, it never quite became what it could have been, which was the hub and the central city within Westeros. And why did it not ever become that? Because literally every few years, whichever family controlled it were wiped out completely. And it was more than just a coincidence of, okay, so sometimes in this world, families sort of rise up and fall away. This was 6, 8 different families completely wiped out when they were at Harrenhal. So, is the Weirwood magic more aggressive or darker in Harrenhal because of the Weirwoods destroyed in its construction? I don't know whether that's the case more broadly, but certainly in terms of protecting Harrenhal from people owning it, yes, I think that is a very strong thing. Disputed Lands, hi there, Amanda, great to see you. I'll give my usual, whenever Amanda's here, I always give a shout out to the Disputed Lands excellent channel. Please do go and check that out. I'm sure somebody in the chat will give a link to that. It wouldn't surprise me if Amanda's got a video on Harrenhal as well. Let's go to a question from one of my patrons. So Fool of a Took asked the question about Ulf, actually. So what I will probably find is a lot of the questions we get in the chat are duplicated by questions from my patrons. Fool of a Took, you were asking about Ulf's backstory, and you said that you think they might be setting something up for later in the season when Daemon meets the Dragon Seeds and starts to question his father's or family's integrity. Yeah, I think that's absolutely valid point. But let's talk about. Disputed Land says, I don't have a video about Harrenhal. Might need to make. Yes, make one. That would be fantastic. Thank you. You don't have to do it just because I say it, but I would love to see it if you do. Simon D. Talking about the dragon eggs. And this is I had a few questions about this actually. Somebody's saying, now that the director of House of the Dragon confirmed the eggs given to Rhaenyra are Dany's eggs, do you still think that Alyssa Farman will appear on the show? My guess is she can still steal them, but what's your take? I was keen to see or hear about her voyages. Raven's Oath saying, though I haven't heard it directly, the talk is the eggs that Rhaenyra sent with her children are the eggs Dany has in Game of Thrones. Well and good show-wise, however, there are 4 eggs in that crate. What are your thoughts on the 4th egg? Diego Godoy saying, hola, Robert, hola. Do you see any chance that the 3 dragon egg situation for House of the Dragon is what really happened in the books? I was under the impression that the eggs Daenerys received are the ones stolen by Alyssa Farman decades before in the Dance of the Dragons. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about these eggs. So first of all, the situation on the show. You will remember that Rhaenyra here talks to Rhaena and says, can you go to the Vale? And basically, I need you to go with the three youngest members of the household, which is Joffrey, Aegon, and Viserys. And there's a couple of hatchling dragons, and here are 4 dragon eggs. And she says, go to the Vale. Lady Jane Arryn was promised a dragon to protect the Vale. Side note, Lady Jane Arryn did not say, please could you send me 3 small children, 4 dragon eggs, and a teenager without a dragon to ride. She agreed a deal for a dragon. So that will definitely be a thing coming up at some point in the next episode or two, is exactly how she reacts to not getting what she thought that she'd agreed. But Rhaenyra is told, go there. But when you're there, can you also write off to Pentos, because she was born in and was raised in Pentos. If you remember back to season 1, in fact, in the book, she's known as Rhaena of Pentos. That's how closely she's associated with it. And the idea Rhaenyra says is that this is our backup plan. If everything goes wrong here on Dragonstone, then you're there with some members of the family, some dragon eggs, and it will be okay because you're there. And this is what Rhaenyra's role is, to protect them and to raise them as well. So that's the deal. We get shown 4 dragon eggs. Now, we got the director, this is a quote from the director of the episode saying, those are Daenerys's eggs. All of us who work on this show are big Game of Thrones fans, so it was very exciting to shoot that scene. Ryan Condal, showrunner, has followed up, basically confirming that and saying that the 4th egg is Viserys's egg. So 3 eggs, which will be Daenerys's, and the 4th, which is Viserys's. So that's what's the situation on the show. Let's go to the situation in the books. Now, a lot of people have name-checked Alyssa Farman there. The story there is, this is decades before this happens. Rhaenyra Targaryen, this is a different Rhaenyra Targaryen. This is the granddaughter of Aegon the Conqueror. Her lover, Alyssa Farman, had this great desire to travel the world and see what was west of Westeros. They had a bit of an ugly split, the two of them, and Alyssa headed off from Dragonstone, stealing 3 dragon eggs, which she then sold to the Sea Lord of Braavos in order to buy a ship that she could sail west. She does buy the ship, she does sail west, and all the hints are that she makes it, which is a fantastic little story. But it means that 3 dragon eggs are now over in Braavos. Jaehaerys, who was king at the time, Jaehaerys I, was very keen to keep the Targaryen monopoly on dragons, and so tried to get them back, but the Sea Lord was adamant, no, he wasn't going to do that. So they came to this kind of very tentative understanding that basically the Sea Lord paid a huge amount of money to the Iron Throne, and also Jaehaerys said, look, if they ever do hatch into dragons, then I'm not going to allow them to live. And that was where it was left, and they didn't hatch, and they kind of disappeared. A lot of the language usage there and a lot of the reading between the lines has led to most, not all, but most of the A Song of Ice and Fire community to conclude that those are the dragon eggs that Dany had. Now, we don't have 100% confirmation from George R. R. Martin on that. This is just what seems to be what he was suggesting through Fire and Blood. And as I say, most people kind of buy into that. If you go to the Dance of the Dragons in the book, what happens is that Rhaenyra heads over, so she doesn't take Aegon and Viserys with her. It's just her and Joffrey, and they head over to the Vale. So Joffrey has a dragon. They actually fly over to the Vale on the back of the dragon, and she has 3 dragon eggs with her. And she prays over those dragon eggs, we're told, night and day. And eventually one of them hatches, and that hatches in and becomes the dragon Morning, which then grows and she rides. And this is one of the great sort of loose threads at the end of Fire and Blood, is what happens to the dragon Morning, because it does not survive more than 2 decades. How does Morning die? We do not know. So that's the situation in the book. So there weren't 4 dragon eggs in the book that went to the Vale. There were 3, of which 1 hatched. So the 2 remaining can't be Dany's, unless you come up with some very complex theorizing about those 2 get linked up with Viserys's one, which was separate but was heading over to Essos, and perhaps got captured along with him. You could work out some convoluted way how that might happen, but there's no indication that those other 2 dragon eggs that went with Rhaenyra made their way over to Essos. So that doesn't seem to be the case in the book. So we've got 2 different stories going on here, and I've got a video coming out about this probably on Saturday, but I always spoil the conclusions of my videos, so I'll do it now. My view is this is okay. There are 2 versions, and I think we just say, okay, there's 2 versions. And the reason why I think we say that there are 2 versions to this is because that's what George R. R. Martin has said is his view on all of this. His view, and I would refer you on, perhaps one of the moderators can put a link, if they can find it, to this in the chat. I'd refer you to an interview that History of Westeros did with George R. R. Martin himself about 2 years ago. And they talked about this idea of canon. And he was very clear that there are 2 canons in his mind. There's book canon, which he has complete control over, and there is show canon, which he doesn't have complete control over. In show canon, he thinks he has 2 roles. The first role is to try and make sure that it is as close as possible to book canon. His second role, he thinks, is to make sure that each show is as close together in terms of canon as it can be. So we have 2 cohesive canons, and there will be differences. They're as close together as they can be, but there will be differences. And this, I think, is one of them. So yes, we can acknowledge that there are differences here. Personally, I prefer Alyssa Fartman as a means for them getting over to Essos. I just think she's a fantastic character. I love the story, and it works out really well. And kind of all of the language hints and things in Fire and Blood work with that. So personally, I prefer that. But the key thing about the story about the dragon eggs is that 3 dragon eggs do make their way over to Essos, and Dany does hatch them. So that's the key point, not exactly how do they get across there and exactly which ones they are. Let's have a quick look in the chat. Ghost Dreamer talking about Aegon's vision. This is the vision, the Song of Ice and Fire. Could Aegon's vision have come from the Children of the Forest, for a southern ally with dragons, and for Harrenhal revenge? Maybe Aegon even met them. So this is quite interesting. So we do not know still the context for Aegon's vision. I think this is something that we will probably get more about whenever we get an Aegon's Conquest TV show. I think that we will get a lot more context on this. We do know from the TV show, the original Game of Thrones TV show, I don't think they made this up from nowhere, is that there are dragonglass mines on Dragonstone. This kind of implies that the Children of the Forest were there at some point. And if you remember, they did nothing with this on the TV show, but John and Danny discovered what looked like some cave paintings in those dragonglass mines, which presumably came from the Children of the Forest or the First Men or something along those lines. So I still don't know why those were included if it wasn't from something that George R. R. Martin said. So I think the potential for there to be some kind of Children of the Forest connection in Dragonstone that we just do not know about is actually a lot higher than we sometimes give it credit for. Let's go to Costume C. Oh, hi there, Heidi. Great to see you. I will give Heidi's channel a shout out as well, because I always try to whenever she's on here. If you love costumes, Heidi is the person to ask about costumes, not just how they're made, what they look like, things like that, but just sort of interpreting the costumes. And I do have a question for Heidi, which I will happily. Well, I'll say it now, and then I'll answer Heidi's question to me, which was we've seen a picture. I think it was a pre-released picture from the next episode of Kristen Cole's horse, which seemed to have like a tiny little unicorn horn, like teeny tiny unicorn horn on it, on the armor, not the actual horse. I mean, I thought is that just trying to show how pure he's trying to be? I don't know. Maybe you didn't notice it, but if you did, I would love your thoughts. But anyway, Heidi says, "What are your thoughts on Aegon wearing Aegon the Conqueror's Valyrian armor?" Condal said it comes from old Valyria. Yeah, actually, I'm going to link this in with a question from Gina Z, one of my patrons, saying in the behind the scenes episode for House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 3, Ryan Condal said that the armor felt like something that Aegon the Conqueror would have had from his time in Old Valyria as like a House of Targaryen family heirloom. I assume he meant Aegon's ancestors' time in Old Valyria, and that got me thinking about the first Targaryens on Dragonstone. Could you give me a brief overview of how many Targaryen generations there were between Aenar the Exile and Aegon the Conqueror? So I'll quickly talk about the generations, and then I'll come back to the armor. So in terms of the generations we've had, there are, and feel free to count these for me, Aegon's father was a guy called Aerion. His father was somebody called Damien. I've actually got these written down, so do not worry, you don't have to memorize these ones. His father was someone called Aerys. His father was someone called Aegon. Aegon was the son of Gaiman and Daenys the Dreamer, which is interesting as an aside because it means that Daenys the Dreamer named her firstborn son Aegon, which straight away creates Aegon as this idea of like there's some connection here with dreams and prophecy and maybe even the prince that was promised. And so they were the children of Aenar, who was the lord when they came across from Old Valyria. So that's Aenar, Gaiman, Aegon, Aerys, Damien, Aerion. So that's 6 generations through to Aegon. But the armor, yes. So this is another, as I said about this episode, this was, there were a lot of just big lore drops. Now, Aegon is there. Aegon II is there with this Valyrian steel armor, which is massive. We didn't know he had Valyrian steel armor. We didn't know that Aegon had Valyrian steel armor. We didn't know that anyone in Westeros had Valyrian steel armor. Valyrian steel is so precious and expensive in Westeros. A sword is enough to bankrupt a small house. If you bought a Valyrian steel sword, a suit of armor is you can't buy it. That's how expensive it. Added to which, the expertise needed to create it in the first place is gone. To reforge it into something else is incredibly rare. So the very fact that there is some Valyrian steel armor out there, first of all, is the main thing. Secondly, the idea that Aegon had it, I agree. Yes, so I think Ryan Condal just misspoke when he was talking about from his time in Old Valyria. I think he definitely meant from House Targaryen's time in Old Valyria. Condor, I've never met or spoken to personally, but I know people who have, who I trust, who assure me that he is one of us. He's a geek like us. He's obsessive like us about A Song of Ice and Fire. I can assure you that it's very easy just to misspeak. So when you're just doing things to camera, I do it literally every live stream. So I will happily forgive this. I think that he knows that Aegon wasn't in Valyria himself. As for it being handed down, uh, I I do quite like the idea. I agree. One of the things which kind of nags at the back of my mind, and I know lots of people's minds, is this concept of the Targaryens left Old Valyria, and Old Valyria, they had so much knowledge, they had so much technology, effectively, they had so much magic, and yet by the time the Targaryens are ruling Westeros, they seem to not have much. They seem to just have two Valyrian steel swords, and that's pretty much it. So one of the things I think House of the Dragon has done very well is to show us that that wasn't just it. There were other things. Now, these vary from right at the very beginning. Episode 1, you had Daemon doing and here's a Valyrian steel necklace for Rhaenyra, and it's like, oh, okay, that's a little bit extra. Then here we have Valyrian steel armor. You had, and they talked about this, I think this was in episode 2. Rhaenyra is there in one of the massive sets they've got for Dragonstone, looking at these books and scrolls, and they showed the walls are filled with all of these scrolls, and this is the information that they've taken from Valyria. And so suddenly it feels like when they left, they didn't just up sticks and just take whatever they happened to have there and then. They did actually think about things. They did bring stuff with them, which changes the question from why didn't they bring the stuff that we think that they should have brought to what happened to all of that stuff. Now, probably when you get Baelor, who we're told burned huge amounts of books and old Valyrian materials and destroyed them, probably a lot of it disappeared then. It's also possible that some of it disappeared with Aegon II. We've already seen him not caring about his dad's big Old Valyria Lego set, the massive model, which is a shame. I love that model. But he just smashed it up. He didn't care about it at all. And I do wonder whether this is a little bit of foreshadowing about what he might do when he's in charge of Dragonstone and even more angry. Will all of those ancient artifacts survive? I suspect not. So I really do like this idea. It solves an issue that I've had nagging at the back of my brain. Many people have had nagging at the back of their brain. Why on earth didn't the Targaryens bring more? We're starting to see the more that they did bring. Jacques-Yves Cousteau, thank you for the super chat. And I didn't see it got message retracted. If there's something, if you did ask a question, oh, I just see it now in the chat. So Daemon's visions in Harrenhal seem like the first Weirwood/Old Gods induced dreams for the Targ across canons, right? The first that we're aware of is probably the fairest way to say it. I think certainly when we get to Bloodraven, of course, Bloodraven combines the two. As far as we're aware, the Targaryen side of magic and the Weirwood side of magic. But the show have already been trying to give us the links between the North and the Targaryens, so it would not surprise me. The previous chat was asking about, is it possible that Aegon the Conqueror's vision was in some way Weirwood induced? It's not beyond all possibility. Ranabin Mitra is saying, oh, this is picking up on one of the things in that we saw Rhaenyra looking at in one of those books, saying, so Daenerys being Balerion's first rider is show canon alone. Please don't say yes. Well, it's one of those things that it is show canon, or at least what we read was show canon, but it kind of fits book canon, so we can say we used to say this a lot of the time, a semi-canon source suggests that she was the first rider of Balerion the Black Dread. It makes sense. Balerion was there. Balerion probably had some kind of some rider. Well, Balerion was there. It makes sense that it was Daenerys. Just having a quick flick through. Costume CO, did you get a chance to think? I was having to see whether you had an answer on the little unicorn thing, but I just see you commented. All of Queen Mary of Scots handmaidens were named Mary. That's a great historical fact. I love that. Thank you very much. Right. Costume CEO saying, yeah, I shared that picture. It is historical that he is compensating. Okay, let's go with that. And Orlando Ben Mitra talking about it could imply that Euron stole the armor from Dragonstone rather than Old Valyria. Yes, so we have one other. I could have mentioned this a bit earlier. We have one other mention of Valyrian steel armor in the Song of Ice and Fire. It's from pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. So again, we're in semi-canon territory here, I guess. And for those who are wondering, so we have got, can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, 8 or 9 of these chapters, some of which are actually written out, some of which George R. R. Martin read out at conventions, and so we just have sort of people's scribblings on what was said rather than actually word for word. George R. R. Martin has said that he has gone back and changed at least one of those pre-release chapters that we've had. So we can't treat those pre-release chapters as the same as a published chapter from the book. I mean, I think probably the Theon one is the closest we can get because that was published along it as a sort of a bonus chapter in many editions of A Dance with Dragons, but the rest of them I don't think we can. But anyway, we have an Aeron chapter where he sees Euron preparing for battle, wearing what seems to be Valyrian steel armor. Now, Euron claims to have got things from Old Valyria and who knows where else. That did seem a little bit far-fetched. We couldn't say definitely no, but if he captured this somehow from Dragonstone or this after Aegon II, and we know what happened to Aegon II after that. Perhaps it got stored somewhere and then got sold on somewhere, and then he picked it up from somewhere else. Maybe that's how it got to him in the end. And yes, Ranabir, I would say it's much more likely that he stole it rather than bought it. Let's go to a question from Paul Al-Gaib saying, hi, Robert, I hope you are well. I am. Thank you very much. Do you think it would have helped Rhaenyra's ascension to the throne if Viserys had named her Hand of the King rather than... Hang on, sorry, just pouring myself some water. Sorry, if had named her Hand of the King perhaps a few years before his death. I know it's a stretch because he never would have wanted the quarrel with Alicent, but it wouldn't be new either as Jaehaerys made his heir Baelor Hand as well. Yeah. Is the short answer. Yes, I agree. That would definitely have helped her. More importantly than just the sort of visuals of it, everyone knew, forget the show for one moment with the deathbed stuff with Alicent, everyone knew that Viserys wanted Rhaenyra to succeed him. The key issue, if we're talking pure pragmatic politics, the key issue for Rhaenyra was the fact that she was not in King's Landing. Her and her court, so to speak, were over in Dragonstone, which allowed Team Green to, and Otto in particular, to start to stack the council, the small council, with his people. If you start looking at who is there on the small council, you go, okay, so he's got an ally in the Lannisters. The Beesburys are actually, yes, we know that poor Lord Beesbury actually was supportive of Rhaenyra, but House Beesbury were vassals of the Hightowers. And then the more you look into it, the more you see the other people within there are also quite closely connected with the Hightowers. So he was building up, and the Greens as a whole were building up their base of control within King's Landing. If Rhaenyra had been Hand of the King, she would have been basically ruling the kingdom for the last few years because Viserys wasn't able to, and she would have been able to appoint the people she wanted to the small council, and her people would have been among the first to discover that Viserys had died, and everything would have been very different. So it's not so much the visuals, as I'm not saying you were suggesting it was just visuals, but it's not just so much the visuals as the practicalities of what that would mean if she were Hand of the King. Jay says, "Hey Robert, I hope you're well and good luck with the elections. Thank you very much. In House of the Dragon, what do you think Rhaenys believes Alicent could actually do to prevent the war? Am I missing something?" You've also asked about House Wild and whether they played a role in hiding Queen Alyssa and young Jaehaerys after Maegor took over, and is that what led to the Corian Wild in Dragonstone situation? I'm not going to go all the way down the dragon hole, the rabbit hole on that one. I think there's every reason that they're not mentioned specifically as being part of that, but I think there's every reason there. Corian Wild was chosen as one of the people who would go there to Dragonstone for Jaehaerys, and she is one of the more fun parts of Fire and Blood. Her account is the caution for young girls, or the alleged account of what she was up to was a caution for young girls. But what in the show did Rhaenys believe Alicent could actually do? We have this situation with, and they kind of dropped it at the beginning, or very near the beginning of the episode, when Rhaenyra and Rhaenys are standing over the grave of the Cargill twins, and Rhaenys is basically saying, you know, you and Alicent are the last people with any type of influence who might be able to slow down, stop this war. And Rhaenyra eventually takes her up on this, and then that's what leads to the meeting at the end of the episode. What did Rhaenys think Alicent could do? I don't think she had a very clear idea on exactly what would happen. We know that Rhaenys, in that little pep talk she gave, her political analysis, it sounded all very wise, but she was definitely a little bit wrong about some things, because she said, "Oh, you know that assassination attempt on you, that wouldn't have been Otto. That's just not his style." But we know from 2-3 episodes before, episode 9 or whatever it was of season 1, that's exactly what Otto suggested. He wanted to send an assassin in. So she's got him a little bit wrong. So her thinking about Alicent, she probably knows Alicent a lot less well than Rhaenyra does. So I tend to the view, and Rhaenys, it has to be said, her character is different certainly at this phase of her life, is different to the books. In the books, when you actually look into it, she is the one who is the most warlike on Team Black. She's the first one to say this is war. She's the first person to say, hey, we should go over there and attack with dragons. She's the person who is very much wanting to be on the front foot and escalating things. Not the character that we have on the TV show. I like the way that they put her in the TV show. I think Eve Best has done a fantastic job. But just so you're aware, there is a characterization difference between the two going on there. But on the show, I think that it's not that she had a particular plan in mind. I don't think that Rhaenys at this point thought, oh, you know what, if only you could go over there and then maybe you could agree some peace terms, maybe you could suggest this, and that wasn't in her mind. I think that basically she was just thinking, this is the only hope. Because right now, things are going to start getting out of hand very quickly. And she's right, of course, on that. Things will get out of hand very quickly. And the only chance, and it was just a small chance, was that if Rhaenyra and Alicent could start talking, maybe they could figure something out. The issue was, for all of sort of the ins and outs of that conversation, the one thing which struck me was that it never ever felt, it was only 2-3 minutes long, that conversation, but it never felt like peace talks. They didn't say, okay, so neither of them came out and said, okay, so how do we go about sort of making sure that our armies don't go out? How do we try and control the more gong-ho members of our small councils? They never actually got to that. This felt a lot more like old friends airing grievances and trying to patch something up. That was the feel. So whatever Rhaenys had in mind, clearly it didn't happen. So I think she just thought there's a 5% chance, it's worth a go. I think that's all it was. And she knew that she couldn't tell Rhaenyra what to do. Rhaenyra wasn't the kind of person who accepts somebody saying, you must go and do this. But Rhaenys knew that she could just plant a seed and then hope maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that something can come from it. Okay, let's go to a question from so Rassler asking about Ulf, which we've already talked about, Ulf White, asking whether there's any claim of being Balon's bastard. Well, I think the one thing that I will add to what I said earlier, which is what a lot of people have said, which is that he doesn't have to be Balon's bastard to have some Targaryen heritage. He could be, and I'm not saying this is at all the case, but he could be a grandson of, or great grandson of Jaehaerys. Seems unlikely, but being Balon's son seems unlikely. There were plenty of other Targaryens around 2 generations ago. There were 13 children. Jaehaerys had 13. Jaehaerys and Alicent had 13 children. So there are plenty of chances for him to have some kind of Targaryen inheritance. So whether it's actually Balon or not, I don't think is the important point here. Corvus Connex saying, good evening, Robert and Dan. I wasn't displeased with the jump cut with the first Battle of the Burning Mill, but it made me wonder about the show's pacing. The showrunners said up to 4 seasons, but I'm interested in your thoughts on them ending with 3 solid seasons to tell this tale, then moving on to adapting the Conquest. Are they moving too swiftly for 4? Okay, so I said at the beginning, and I've stuck to this. If I were doing this, I'm clearly not, but if I were adapting this, I would have season 1 as the build-up, which has happened. Season 2 is the sort of the first phase of the Dance of the Dragons, which takes you up to Rhaenyra taking King's Landing. Season 3 is the middle phase, which is up to the storming of the Dragon Pit and Rhaenyra having to leave King's Landing. And then season 4 is just everything's gone to hell in a handbasket. and ending with the Hour of the Wolf. That is how I would do it. And then personally, because I love it so much, I would take an extra season to do the Regency. But that would be how I would box this up. 4 seasons, 1 season of build up to the dance, 3 seasons of the dance. That very broadly seems to be what they've been saying. The mood music out of HBO seems to have been 4 seasons, maybe 5. That seems to be what they've been saying. Now, how is this pacing working? I agree that this was interesting with the Battle of the Burning Mill. What they did right at the very beginning was they showed the intro and then they cut to the end. They showed the result. I thought that worked really well. They won't be able to show every battle like that, or it will very clearly get a little bit used and worn as a mechanism for showing a battle, but I thought that was very effective that time. They are not going to show every battle of the war, I think is the first thing to say along these lines, which means that we're not going to, for every single battle, have one episode set aside for that battle. Sometimes it'll just be we hear a report of this battle or that battle. So, and like this, as far as I can tell, I mean, we might get it in later episodes, but as far as I can tell, they kind of merged the Burning Mill and the Battle of Stonehenge, which also happened around that time. So, are they roughly working on the kind of timescale I'm talking about? Yes, I would say. What do they have to include between now and the end of the season? Well, a bit more about Daemon at Harrenhal and working with the River Lords. We have to have the Battle of Rook's Rest. We have to have the aftermath of the Battle of Rook's Rest. We will have, because they've set this up now, we will have what happens in the Vale of Arryn and potentially sending the kids over to Pentos. We will have the build up to the army, the Green Army, and Vhagar heading out again from King's Landing, gaining Harrenhal, discovering that Daemon's not there, and then taking of King's Landing. They may also, if I had to guess, lead all the way up to Criston Cole's death at the end of this season, because they've really played up Criston Cole this season, and I think that would add quite a dramatic endpoint. Last episode or penultimate episode, his death. I think that seems to be the kind of dramatic ending that they've been using so far this season. So, very broadly, I think they're on track for what I roughly think they were going to be doing. They may or may not have the taking of King's Landing this season. If they don't, it would have to be at the very beginning of next season. They may or may not have the Battle of the Gullet this season. If they don't, it'll have to be the beginning of next season. But very broadly speaking, that's where they are at. I can't. They could slow things down after this. They could push it to more, but I don't think they would be able to do justice to the dance and just having this season they've got at the moment and one more season to take it up to the Hour of Wolf. Martin S. saying Ulf is a Scandinavian. Hi there, Martin, by the way. Is a Scandinavian name meaning wolf. The feminine version is Ylva. Really, a Stark should have the name Ulf. Interesting point. So Ulf White is might he have some Stark blood in him? You guess no. It doesn't seem likely. What is quite interesting, I think, is that he is the first of the 3 that we've seen so far of the Dragon Seeds. We've had Adam Velaryon, we've had Hugh Hammer, and now we've had Ulf White. He's the first one that you've gone, oh, he doesn't seem like a good guy. They set up Adam Velaryon for us to be quite sympathetic to him. They set up Hugh Hammer for us to be quite sympathetic towards him. Ulf White, no, not really. We're supposed to maybe like him, find him charismatic, interesting to watch, but not think that he's a good person. So I think the link across to the Starks is an interesting one. I don't think they're going to do anything with that. What I think is going to be quite interesting is the fact that he's going to be the one who most obviously we're suspicious of to start with. Reflective rambling, picking up a question for Annabelle Mitra. Thank you. I love it when people do this. Saying, could Helena have forgiven Alicent for an event that could be taking place in the future? Yes, absolutely, she could. So, for those who don't remember, there's a great scene in episode 3 where Helena has actually some of the most cogent, um, dragon dreamery type things or conversation that that Helene has had when she's talking to Alicent, and she kind of turns around at the end of it and says, "I forgive you." And Alicent, I mean, point number one, Alicent clearly took it as forgiveness for what she thinks that she's done, the bad things that she thinks she's done. So I think that that's how, in terms of driving the plot forward, that's how this is going to be important. Whether this could be something that Helena feels she has to forgive her mother for in the future is intriguing, because then we have to ask, what is it that Alicent does to Helena in the future that might merit that? And there's nothing in the book, there's nothing immediate that springs to mind. It does make me wonder, though, baby Maelor hasn't appeared yet, presumably will appear at some point. Baby Maelor in the book gets, when King's Landing falls, baby Maelor gets sent off to with a member of the Kingsguard to safety, away from King's Landing. Now, we don't know how they're going to handle this in the book. Assuming Maelor appears, this just made me wonder, are they going to do something along the lines of Alicent, against Helena's will, taking her newborn baby from her, saying this baby has to have safety, and send the baby off? If you've read the book, you know that the baby's fate is not a pleasant one. And maybe Rhaenyra would have arrived and wished desperately to show that she wasn't the person who was wanting to be killing Helena's children, and would have looked after them and cared for them. But Alicent sent her away, and therefore Alicent was responsible indirectly for a second of Helena's children's death. It's sad, it's tragic, but I think this whole thing is going to be tragic. LD saying, hey, I feel they haven't explained the Black Council very well. Do you expect any deep dives into these lords? Thank you. I think that they will explain the Black Council a little bit more when the Black Council is in King's Landing. So at the moment, what you find is that we know a lot of the wider characters around Team Black. People like Daemon, Rhaenys, Corlys, who haven't always been there as part of the Black Council, but they've been sort of around. Jace as well. They've been around. We've been introduced to those people. We've not really been introduced to the core members, the Maesters, the Lord Celtigar, people like that. But they will become more important when Rhaenyra sets up camp in King's Landing. Those people will be, at least partly because some of the people I've just mentioned will not be around anymore, those people will be the people in her small council, and we will need to get a little bit more information about them. There is, and I emphasize this quite a lot, but I think it's quite important. There are a lot of new characters that the show has had to introduce in season 2. They introduced a lot of characters in season 1. There are a lot of new characters in season 2, and I think that the showrunners understandably have been wary of introducing characters who they do not need to give particular names to, because they're not that important yet. When they do become important, we will learn a little bit more about them. Scamelia saying, sorry for the non-House of the Dragon question, but as a huge fan of the Travels of Westeros, when can we expect the re-upload? I miss the Weary Traveller. Yes, so the Traveller's Guide to Westeros, I am redoing it. I'll be honest, at the moment I'm focusing on House of the Dragon. When that's over, then I will turn my attention to that, and they will be re-uploaded first for patrons, and then I will figuring out how I'm going to get them back up onto YouTube. Mina Blackfire, thank you for the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to that one. Do let me know if there was one. Reflective Rambling picking up for Sammy Elias. Thank you very much. Saying, what about the scar on Myssaria's neck? She did not answer the question when she was asked about it. Was it hidden last season or new? The implication was that she got this from Daemon. Daemon... he's grabbed Rhaenyra's neck a couple of times now. This doesn't seem to be a new thing for him. Mysaria was his previous lover, and I think that this was just trying to show the link between these two characters. Rhaenyra understood what Mysaria had been through with Daemon. Daemon's a fantastic. Matt Smith's done a great job. Daemon's a fantastic character, but let's not brush over it. There is a dark side there, and it's a dark side that George R. R. Martin, when he was writing the character, was very clear was there. And I think this is showing me. We saw Mysaria as basically saying, "So he's just walked out on you, then." Yeah, I know how that feels. And then Rhaenyra can also see visible symbols of what she sees in her own relationship with Daemon. So I think that's what they are showing, is that there are links across there between those two characters. Martin S. saying the Swedish words for wolf is vag, which I mentioned in an earlier live stream, hence warging. And Ulf, notice how similar the latter is to the name Ulf. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. If somebody can try and draw out the link across between Ulf White and the Starks, I would be very happy to read that out. I'll keep an eye on the chat for that. Aegon the First Targaryen, good to see you. Your Grace saying, can you go through the Alyssa Farman theory? Yes, I did this a little bit earlier in the live stream, but I'm happy to quickly go through this again. This is the book theory on how the three dragon eggs get to Dany, which is Alyssa Farman was the lover of Rhaenyra Targaryen, not the Rhaenyra that we know, a previous Rhaenyra. They had a bit of a falling out. Alyssa Farman wanted to travel the world, see what was west of Westeros. In order to pay for that, she stole 3 dragon eggs and went over, and we know that she went over to Essos. She ended up in Braavos, sold them, bought a ship, and went off and did her exploring. Those 3 ended up with the Sea Lord of Braavos, and the Sea Lord basically bought them off of the state, of the Seven Kingdoms state, in exchange for this tacit understanding that if they ever did turn into dragons, then there would be an issue. If they didn't, they're just very pretty ornaments they've bought. And they stayed there. And the working assumption is that they ended up in the hands of, and there is some language, I sort of mentioned this obliquely a couple of times, there are some language things in there about what if they end up in the hands of some spicemonger in Pentos, and it's like they ended up in the hands of a cheesemonger in Pentos. That's the kind of thing, because Illyrio is often mentioned as being a cheesemonger. So they were there with the Sea Lord of Braavos. They probably were kept for as long as the Braavosi thought that there's a possibility they could hatch. But after 150, 60 years, they probably decided they probably wouldn't. And so when somebody offered them a good price for them, they probably were happy to sell. Illyrio ended up with them, and he handed them on to Dany as a wedding gift. So that's the working theory. It's never been 100% confirmed by George R. R. Martin, but I would say the most Song of Ice and Fire fans think that it's the most likely theory. Lumen Cascade. We've met some dragon seeds. When will we be introduced to nettles? Now, this is a question lots of people are asking. The short answer is we do not know. And we've not been told. The showrunner has been evasive on the record. Many people have said that he's been evasive when asked about nettles. This does not necessarily mean what some people fear, which is that nettles has been written out. Some people fear that perhaps Nettles' role is going to be taken over by either Baelor or Rhaenyra. Perhaps Rhaenyra Targaryen is going to hatch a dragon egg, and she will effectively become the fourth dragon seed, and then because she's Daemon's daughter, then that might link in with the idea of was Nettles Daemon's daughter, etc., etc. So that's the fear that some people have, is that Nettles is just going to be written out. The truth is that, I mean, I don't know when we're going to get the dragon seeds formally introduced as, let's try and match you up with some dragons. It certainly won't be before episode 5. It's probably going to be episode 6 or 7 would be my guess. And the story we have of Nettles is that her dragon bonding took longer than the others and was a bit of a surprise. So we got the first 3 who bonded with dragons who had already previously had owners. And then sometime later, Nettles very slowly started trying to bond with Sheepstealer, giving sheep a sheep a day each time, slightly closer, building up trust, building up a bond, and then eventually Nettles bonds with Sheepstealer, and it's like, whoa, where did you come from? And who are you? And you don't look much like a Targaryen. What's going on here? Now, in my mind, that has to happen at least an episode later, because there has to be a time gap. And it's entirely possible that they have her appear at the very end of the season, and Ryan Condal's not talking about this because he wants her to be a surprise. For non-book readers, it's entirely possible that he's decided that she should come in at the beginning of next season, and he doesn't want to talk about her this season because, hey, she's not one of the characters this season. There's a whole host of reasons why he might not be wanting to talk about her yet, but she should not appear until the end of this season at the earliest, in my view. Question from Maura Lee. Oh, not a question. Hi there, Maura, again, saying just a show of love for the content, merch, and stories. Well, thank you. I hugely appreciate that. April May saying the scar from Mysaria goes all the way round her neck. Mysaria has had her head cut off and then reattached. Wow, I mean, I hadn't spotted it was that bad. But April May saying Rhaenyra walked a full circle around her and her face was pure shock. So I don't. I have to admit I would have to have another look at that one. Right, I think that's me caught up in the chat. Ranabi Mitra just saying Rhaenyra not having a dedicated egg meant for her eventually becoming mourning is something really fishy, according to me. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing that is notable. Rhaenyra in the book went with 3 eggs of her own, and she was praying over them, hoping that she was going to hatch one for herself, and that was very clearly for her. She hasn't here, and the one that we know that is not the one that was 3 Dany's ones, we're told is Viserys's. So it's all, a little bit fishy. What was correct? Saying, I enjoyed this last episode very much, especially the scene with Daemon having some kind of hallucination. What do you think was the significance of the banging he heard at his bedroom door and seeing a young Queen Rhaenyra chastising him while trying to sew the young prince's head back on his head? I think I've answered these questions already. feel free to drop me another question on my next live stream. If I haven't, I think I've picked up on those visions already. Maura Lee saying, I was both surprised and happy that Queen Rhaenyra attempted to talk to Queen Alicent at the end of the episode about the Prince Was Promised and the prophecy. It fleshed out more of their characters, gave us more of an insight into what was in their hearts. What do you think this scene? Why do you think this scene was written into the episode? Was it just to show the hopelessness of it all and the futility of war? Well, I think that's definitely part of it. It's also a recognition of the way that the show have set up the central relationship of this story as being Alicent and Rhaenyra. At the very beginning, one of the things we noted was the way that they had been deliberately changed in age. Rhaenyra had been aged up so that she could be childhood besties with Alicent. In the book, when Alicent marries Viserys, she's 18 years old. Rhaenyra is 9. They did not have that relationship before. It was very different. This was just like the new, very young stepmom. But still, there was sort of a near generational gap between them. So this wasn't this kind of friendship equals thing going on. In the show, that's very much what we've got here. And the whole thing you can interpret as being the outpouring of this relationship between the two of them. So this moment here is establishing that link once more. They will meet again at least one more time. Alicent, well, when Rhaenyra, in the book, when Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, Alicent is there. Alicent, at that point, puts a peace offer to Rhaenyra, and she basically comes up with this plan to split the kingdom in half and say, well, we'll have half of it, you have half of it. And Rhaenyra rejects it out of hand. So I do wonder whether this is going to be what we've just seen this last episode is kind of a build up for that, and that's going to be kind of a payoff from it, because here we have Rhaenyra coming to Alicent and risking herself, risking her life in order to try and find some peace. And later we'll have Alicent going to Rhaenyra in some way and trying to, risking herself in some way to try and find some peace. So I wonder whether this is some kind of payoff we're going to have going on there. Rika de Vries saying, hello, Robert. How are you? I'm well, thank you. I was watching episode 3 of House of the Dragon. In my opinion, Lord Simon Strong really looks like a much older Sam Tarly. What do you think? Yeah, he does. He does, you're right. He is the actor here. For those who don't know this, by the way, this is, I think, really interesting. The actor is a guy called Simon Russell Beal, Sir Simon Russell Beal. He is an eminent stage actor in the UK. He's generally recognised as being one of the top stage actors of his generation. So he's not the kind of person that you just wheel in for a tiny role that doesn't have any emotional impact. Now, given the fact that we know, unless they're going to make a big change to the character, that this character has not got a huge amount of time, he is sort of going to be the face and representation, along with Alice Rivers, of Harrenhal. So expect his role to actually be quite significant this season. You already noticed, I think, that a lot of the humour they brought out through his role with his just, when he was saying, sorry about that, about what food was on offer, and sort of apologising on behalf of his cook and things like that. Very understated, but I think you could see that there was a lot more sort of subtlety and nuance to that. But expect more there. This is not just somebody who's been hired on a whim. This is somebody who they hired because they want top drawer emotion from. Alfad saying, "Hello, Robert. Can we consider that the last House of the Dragon episode confirmed that there is some Weirwood magic active at Harrenhal, even in the books? If yes, then which important events should we rethink from the magical perspective that happened at Harrenhal?" Yeah, I think definitely, obviously, in the show. In the books, George R. R. Martin has had a very active role in this, and I think he will definitely have had a very active role in discussing how Harrenhal comes across, particularly given the fact that he's also in active development of a Tourney at Harrenhal stage play. So that would be the link across I would most look for, is that we already think of the Tourney at Harrenhal as having quite a Weirwoody link because of Howland Reed. Howland Reed arrived there, was at the center of all of these things happening, and he arrived there from the Isle of Faces and basically was sent by the Green Men. So, yes, there is a lot there, but what we've never had is the explicit link between the power of the Weirwood network and what actually has happened there. We will see that a lot more here, I suspect. A question from Victoria Gill. Hi there, Victoria, saying, "What is your thoughts on the death imagery around Aemond? Coin over the eye in episode 2, like how the scepter prepared the dead. White Walker when he was naked, rail thin, muscular, white hair flowing, blue eye." Yeah, I mean, it's definitely there. He I mean, I'd not really thought you are right there with the when he was naked. The imagery did feel quite White Walkery with the long white hair, the blue eye, things like that. He he is death, and he's marked for death. That is his role here. I don't think that they are trying to make a specific link across to the White Walkers. That might have been a deliberate bit of imagery. I suspect it probably was that's just what the character looks like. He is a character who most obviously is in the line of fire throughout this story. A lot of characters are staying behind Dragonstone, King's Landing. Even someone like Daemon is not always fighting battles. Aemond, wherever he's going, right from the very first combat, it's him on Vhagar. He's always heading out there. He is the person who is most like the Angel of Death. He's on the most dangerous dragon, and he is wanting to present this image, which we've seen is not 100% true, of being the most dangerous and callous member of this war as well. Adrian Spear, thank you very much for the super sticker. Thank you very much. And also asking whether IDG Live will be on Spotify at some point. Quite possibly when I figure out how to do it. Yes, it's always with these things. Lots of things are good ideas, and I would love to do them, but it's can I figure out how to do it, and do I have the time to do it? So at some point, yes. Al had also asking about Jaime's first dream after leaving Harrenhal, with the bear, Cersei leaving, and Brienne coming into his life, and prophetic elements. What I would like to say there is that there is definitely a kind of a feel, um, the connection. Is that the right word? A feeling connection between that and what we saw with Daemon here, is that they're sort of walking through this, not really sure what's going on, seeing something, being accused of something by people that they care about. That's what happens there with Jaime, is that he's accused by Rhaegar and his Kingsguard brethren, accused of things, and then he's basically marked for death. And Jaime also is told, you'll die when the lights go out, and that's the same kind of feel. So there is a feel there, and there's obviously the Weirwood connection because Jaime gets that dream after sleeping on with his head on a Weirwood stump, and this is Daemon within the very Weirwoody space of Harrenhal. Lord Medici saying, 7 blessings, Lord Robert, and to you too, sir. In your video about Sir Aric and Sir Eric, you drew a beautiful connection between the 2 Kingsguard brothers and the Arthurian tale of Sir Balin and Sir Balan. I thought it was brilliant of you to spot this. Well, I will happily give all of the credit for that one over to Aziz, who did the bulk of the writing on that. That was one of the ones that I do a collaboration with History of Westeros on a few of my videos, and that was one of those ones, and that was his connection. So I will pass the credit on there. This has made me keep my eyes open for more nods to the stories of King Arthur during the last episode, and there's a lot. The aesthetics of Daemon's wandering through Harrenhal reminded me of Sir Balin's wanderings through the ruined halls of the Fisher King. Alice Rivers gave me strong Morgan Le Fay kind of vibes. We even get our own very green-armoured Sir Gawain Hightower, which to me is a simultaneous nod to the Round Table Sir Gawain and his nemesis, the Green Knight. A text translated by Tolkien himself. Arthurian nods have been everywhere in this episode. What do you think? Yes, I think it's absolutely true. I do not know the extent to which that is intentional, but certainly Gawain the Green Knight it is a George R. R. Martin nod, I think, and I think definitely the Eric thing is also a George R. R. Martin nod to the established kind of myth of the twins fighting each other. For those who didn't see that, the irony was that those 2 twins in the Arthurian legend, they did not know, they were in disguise and so did not know who they were fighting each. This time the disguise was as each other, so they definitely knew who they were fighting. It's just other people who didn't. So I think this is George R. R. Martin thing rather than the House of the Dragon thing specifically, but yeah, it's definitely a good thing to note. Auntie Slayer saying, I continue to be fascinated by the 2 canons we have for the dance. I love that the show is able to add context to the outline Fire and Blood gives us without a huge fear of contradicting the text. That being said, which added parts of the show we've seen so far do you think are safe to consider canonical to both mediums? And what has been the biggest diversion? Well, I think the one that we've had the most confirmation from George R. R. Martin on is Aegon's vision, Aegon's prophecy, A Song of Ice and Fire. George R. R. Martin has basically come out and said the details may be slightly different, but this is true, which kind of fits in with a few things he'd said before. So I think we go with that is now, it's not yet in the books, but as strong a semi-canon as we're going to get. As for diversions, I mean, it's a slightly more esoteric one. I think the humanizing of Daemon, for me, is the one thing that has veered away the most, that I think is very much just a show only thing. They have started to show, season 2, they've started to show more of his dark side. In season 1, there was a lot of emphasis on the people that he loved and the people he cared for and how these were soft spots for him, which was not something which was in the books. Now, that doesn't mean that that wasn't true in the books. It just wasn't something that we were shown in the books. Weirwood Net, is Black Alley 400 years old in Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon? I can't remember hearing that in the audiobook when I listened to it. We don't know. If I had it in front of me, I would happily read out the extract, but we're told that she appeared 40. She looked about 40, but she was probably older than that, maybe a lot older than that. Now, I think the 400 years old thing, as much as anything else, comes from the links across to Melisandre and what Carice Van Houten said about her at the time, way back when Game of Thrones was on. But could she be 400? Possibly. We're not told. So hang on, let me see if I can find it quickly, just so that we have the quote. So we have Alice Rivers was at least 40 years of age during the Dance of the Dragons. That much is known. Mushroom makes her even older. All agree that she looked younger than her years, but whether this was simple happenstance or achieved through her practice of the dark arts, men continue to dispute. So that's what we're told. We're not told 400 years or anything like that. 40 is what we're told, but looked young, potentially younger, was potentially older. Um, And yes, so I assume when you said Black Alley, thank you, Reflect for rambling. You just to clarify, uh, Black Alley is Alison Blackwood. I'm assuming you're talking about Alice Rivers here. At least that's how I was answering the question. Question from Lady Pushkins. Why do you think Helena doesn't act on her visions and dreams? Do you think it's her reserved personality and confidence, or she doesn't realize what they could mean? I think it's much more the latter. I don't think um, that if she's sort of saying there's a beast under the boards, I don't think she knows what that means necessarily. And it could just be that she only realizes, like all good prophecies, she only realizes with hindsight what they meant. She only realizes looking back what it was. That my interpretation, I don't know whether this is what the showrunners have said, but my interpretation of that scene when we get blood and cheese and she kind of like raises her finger and she points at her son is, and then she has this kind of look, why am I pointing? It's almost like she's suddenly realizing, yeah, this is, I saw this and now this is happening, and it's almost as if she feels as if it's almost beyond her control. Um, Catherine Furseth saying, Episode 3 made me think about dragon dreams and how to distinguish them from others or from visions. Have you talked about how House of the Dragon has provided us with new insights and new information on Targaryens who have them, like Viserys and Helena? In the episode, Daemon experiences visions that I interpreted as being forced on him, either by Alice Rivers or perhaps the Weirwood trees, or even the proximity of the Isle of Faces. I don't much like the idea of Daemon having dragon dreams himself, but these visions are interesting. What are your thoughts on these? Yeah, so one thing which has come out is that we've added to the number of Targaryens we know have had dragon dreams of some kind. Previously, the situation has been that dragon dreamers had seemed to be, from the information we had, they'd seemed to be not rare, but not most Targaryens. There were some times when there were a few in a generation, but most of the time we didn't hear about it. This, I think, makes us wonder. We now know that Aegon the Conqueror was a dragon dreamer, Viserys was a dragon dreamer. We've obviously got Helena as a dragon dreamer. I think this is now going, well, even many of those who didn't realize were dragon dreamers are dragon dreamers. What percentage of Targaryens are actually dragon dreamers? It's actually now getting quite high. So that's the first thing, is that we're being told that a lot more of Targaryens have these prophetic dreams and visions than we previously had thought. And they there are some who just get one or two. That's the impression we get with Viserys, who seem to have a couple of them, and probably Aegon as well. But we also get some, like Helena, who seem to get them almost non-stop. And this, we get kind of this connection across to Deer and the Drunkard, who we will see in Duncan Egg, who is, he drinks because he can't sleep otherwise, because every time he sleeps he gets these dragon dreams and he just can't stop them. And that's the kind of feeling we have with Helena. So it does seem as though the amount of Targaryens have them is higher than we previously thought, and the amount who have lots of them is also much higher. And we should probably look again at the Targaryens who we're told, because there are quite a few in Fire and Blood, who we're told are simple-minded or something along those lines, and ask ourselves, are they actually dragon dreamers, but they just weren't recognized? Brandy 1842 saying, I find it a little weird how Laris Strong seems to know just about everything that's going on. Assures Alicent he's got trustworthy people as staff for the Red Keep, and yet blood and cheese slip through his fingers in a conveniently empty castle. Might he be in on the plan, and or did he purposely allow it to happen to further increase his power in the following conflict? Also, I'm currently reading Dunk and Egg for the first time and like it just as well as the main series, but I didn't understand if Old Man Sir Arland actually knighted Dunk or not, or is the entire purpose of the story that it doesn't come down to technicalities, but more about what it means to be a knight? Well, I'll answer that second bit first. Yes, is the broad answer. That one of the things about this story is that what is a true knight? A true knight is somebody who does the knightly things. They protect the weak. They stand by their word. They're true and honourable and upright. Dunk is those things. Dunk is a true knight. However, all of the implications are that he wasn't knighted. Now, you're saying that you're reading them, so I won't give you all of the evidence for that. It does come up as you're going through, but what I would say, because it happens in the first few pages of the book, is that it's very noticeable that you get scene one, Dunk there burying the knight Sir Arlan of Pennytree, and he's thinking, oh, what do I do now? I was a squire to this knight. I mean, what am I now? The knight's died. I've got nothing. Maybe I'll go and join a city watch or hire myself out somewhere. And then it's, oh, I've had an idea. And then the next thing is that he's riding off and telling everyone that he got knighted. So it's very set up from the very beginning. We don't see it happen. And we're led to see this as being just an idea that he had as a way to carry on. And that wasn't his initial thought. His initial thought was not, oh, well, I'm a knight now. What do I do with this? So that's on that bit. On the first thing, Laris Strong, might he be in on this in some way? I find this fascinating. I know that Joe Magician has done a video. I've not seen it, so I can't comment. I know Joe Magician has done a video basically suggesting that Laris Strong, there is evidence that Laris Strong was not necessarily in on what happened with Blood and Cheese, but allowed it to happen, which at a very basic level, you have to say seems possible, because here he is effectively Master of Whisperers, and he's only just been appointed it, but effectively that's what he is, seems to know almost everything going on, and yet he seems to have allowed this assassination attempt, not very well organized assassination attempt, to happen without noticing it or knowing it was going to happen. So that does seem a little bit odd. There is also the line which I've quoted so many times because I'm still waiting to find out if they're going to pick up on it in the show. It was just left hanging in the book that said that Daemon had allies in, and this was written in connection with Blood and Cheese, that he had allies in the Red Keep still, indeed, even in the Green Council, which makes you go, well, who? It's not Alicent. It's not Otto. It's not the king. It's not Lord Lannister. It's Lord Beesbury's dead. Doesn't seem likely to be the Maesters. I mean, who's left? Ironrod doesn't seem likely. Probably the only person left is Laris. And so you have to go, so does that make Laris the ally of Daemon? In the book, that seems possible because his motivations are never made clear. Here, maybe, who knows? He certainly seems to be doing a good job of setting Team Green against itself. If you just take a step back, he's turned Aegon against Otto. He's managed to turn Alicent against a whole load of people. He's making people suspicious of each other. So I don't know if they're going to do anything with it, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Max Kingdom saying, "Hello, Robert. I have to say I loved the depiction of Harrenhal in episode 3. I did too. It felt equally gigantic in its scope and yet quiet and desolate. I felt it really conveyed the haunted supernatural aspect of the castle that I felt was slightly lacking when Harrenhal was shown on Game of Thrones." I agree completely. I thought they did a really good job there. I did like Damon kind of wandering around and there was no one there. I did like the dining hall that they were in, that there was just a few of them and it felt quite intimate, but at the same time it was clearly this massive hall with these huge doors, and moaning about how hard it was to light fires and things. That felt very right. On that topic, is there a castle or fortification from the books that you would love to see depicted in a TV show? Not necessarily how likely it is to be seen in one. Why that castle or building? What key concept or feeling do you would think would need to be conveyed well by the set designers? Well, the one that I would love to see is the High Tower. We've seen the outside of it. When Sam went down on the TV show, he went down to Old Town. You kind of saw it there. There was a great establishing shot of Old Town with the High Tower. I would love to see inside it, because we've not even been in there in the books, but at the base of it, dug into the rock of the island it is, we've got this fused black stone that is very mysterious. It seems to be the same kind of fused black stone we have at the Five Forts, right at the very far end of Essos, the far end of Yi Ti. And this seems to be connected in some way with the fused black stone that the Dragon Riders, the Valyrians, did, but maybe an earlier version. It's not entirely sure. What does that tell us? That seems to be very old. Old Town was the first part of Westeros that was settled. So what can we learn? So I would love to see that, and added to which all the way up to the top, and just see what the views would be like from there. So I would love that. It had to feel ancient and magical, and which I guess a bit like Harrenhal, but like rather than the spookiness, the ancient element. Question from Luna Cascade. Can you discuss second sons, or second son-itis, and the common attributes they share and how they seem to drive the story? Examples being Otto, Daemon, Aemond, Tyrion. Yes. So this is something which I'm sure clinical psychologists will be able to do a better general explanation. But it is a noticeable thing, not just in our world, but particularly in George R. R. Martin's world, that we get the second sons from, say, the noble houses in particular, because we see most of our story from the noble houses' perspective, so we know more about them. The first son inherits. In this patriarchal society, the first son inherits. The first son is, from a very young age, often taught to take responsibility quite seriously, is taught to assume control, is implicitly listened to. They get what they want, they learn in command, and when their father dies, they take over and they rule. That's the root of the first son. The second son does not have that. And the second son often grows up in great privilege, and often sometimes feels a little bit jealous, or feels that perhaps they're better suited to being in control, but that there's no route for them, legal and honest route for them to be doing that. Sometimes they feel they have to prove themselves in some way, and sometimes they just the lack of responsibility makes them slightly freer spirits. So George R. R. Martin has taken that idea, which is seen in a lot of monarchies in the real world. Feel free to pick a monarchy going back through history, and you'll find quite a lot of second sons are the more free-spirited. The first sons are often the more responsibility focused, and the second sons tend to be the ones who go off and do their own thing a lot more. Let's put it that way. So George R. R. Martin plays up on this. He's even got a whole sellsword company called the Second Sons, which was established by these second sons who they weren't going to inherit. There wasn't they didn't want to marry somebody in some kind of lower station, so they wanted to go off and seek their fortune themselves, a little bit of fame, and so they joined a sellsword company called the Second Sons. And even more specifically, we get this whole range of second sons in the story who fit this model strongly. And here in the Dance of the Dragons in particular, we have Daemon, who is archetypal second son. He's charismatic, mercurial, but also pretty horrific. And he we've already seen playing out through this questions: does he feel jealous of Viserys? Does he feel that he was better deserving of ruling? Does he feel he has to go off and prove himself? All of these kinds of things. That is mirrored in Aemond as well, who has the same kind of. We again see these questions being asked. Does he, particularly season 1, these questions were raised? Does he see himself as being more able to rule than Aegon? Season 2, he's there actually with a map saying, well, what we should do, this is the plan of attack we should be doing these things. Why am I not in charge? Why can't I? Because I'm not. My brother's the king. So, and he again seems to have some points to prove. So this is something George R. R. Martin strongly has emphasized throughout this story. Is there a reason for that? I mean, I think he just uses it as a shortcut to help us understand a few characters, but then also as a shortcut to help us see some mirroring, and the mirroring between Daemon and Aemond is, I think, quite clear. Let's go to Madeline Tyrell-Dayne saying, "Hi, Robert. Do you think Alice Rivers caused Daemon's vision herself? If so, what would her motivation be? And her motivation for telling Daemon that he will die?" I think I've covered a little bit of this already. I don't. What her motivation for telling Daemon he will die? It felt more of just an observation, really. It was, oh, you're going to die here, because she's seen him, he's arrived, and it's like, well, who are you? What role have you got here in this place? That's the feel that she's put across in that one episode that we've seen, is that why are you here? What's going on with you then? And so it wasn't said in a way to make him angry. It wasn't said in a way to particularly make him do anything. She just said it and walked away. It was just a statement of fact, which actually made her feel slightly, in terms of delivery, it was quite close to Helena. It was just you're going to die here, and then walked away. So yeah, it was deliberately underplaying it. I don't think the implication was that she caused the visions. I think the implication was that she happened to be there at the end of them, and sort of magically appeared there at the end of them, rather than caused that first thing herself. But maybe they'll explain that a little bit more as we go along. As for what will happen with her alleged son, with Aemond, which appears at the very end of Fire and Blood Part 1, who she claims is Aemond's son and the true ruler of Westeros. We don't know. This is one of the other big hanging threads after Fire and Blood season one. George R. Martin left it there. History, and it's quite right, is that history does not just stop at the end of, right, we've reached this moment in time. We'll, as a history book, we'll stop there, and then we'll pick up with a whole new load of bits of history. There are things which carry on through those time periods, so that made it feel more like a real history book that was left as a hanging thread. So we don't know what happens. If I had to speculate wildly, write some fan fiction, I don't know. I wonder whether this is all going to connect in with perhaps how we have to get rid of something of mourning somehow. Is mourning going to die in uh, taking out Alice Rivers in some way? Because Alice Rivers seems not to survive. The baby seems not to survive. We certainly don't hear about it anymore. So that problem has to be dealt with, and mourning has to die at some point during that period. So it does make you wonder: are the two connected? Madeline Tyrell-Dayne also asking about Alicent saying, Helena telling Alicent she forgave her, which I answered from a super chat a little bit earlier. Right, that's, I think, all the questions I've got about that House of the Dragon episode. I've got a few more broader questions on Song of Ice and Fire. Do feel free to drop more questions into the chat, though. King of Imps saying, hey, Robert, my question today is about the size of Westeros. George R. R. Martin has said that he's not overly concerned about the nitty-gritty of distances or size and prefers to keep things vague to avoid tripping up. But being a good geek, I still want to know how big the Seven Kingdoms are. George R. R. Martin has said that Westeros is about the size of South America, and that the lands north of the Wall are about the size of Canada. Using these as a rough guide, what can we estimate the size of each of the constituent territories of the Seven Kingdoms is? By my estimate, that makes the north about the size of Brazil, but my math skills quickly drop off after that. Yeah, so I will, on this one, I didn't have a chance to actually go through and sort of do the measuring myself. So what I will do is I will try and answer this one at some point over the week on X. If you're not in King of Imps, if you're not over there on X, then feel free to raise this in the next live stream, and I will happily read it out to you there. But this will take me a little bit longer than just sort of off the top of my head stuff. DickCrabb'sSquire saying, greetings. I drive an hour to work each way and I listen to a Song of Ice and Fire audiobooks. I was listening to the last Davos chapter in Dance with Dragons, where Wex is produced. His description is very similar to Tom O'Seven's. Wide smile, pointed nose. Wex is deft with a throwing dagger, and Tom wears a brace of throwing knives. Tom has bastards everywhere. He's travelled to the Vale, so why not the Iron Islands? Wex is supposedly a bastard son of Lord Botley, but Botley's lover would just as easily be wooed by a travelling singer, but leaving the Lord to believe Wex is his. Wex is mute, but Tom explicitly says his sons all have beautiful voices. What are your thoughts? Yeah, I have to admit, I'd not really thought about this before. We've not really. Tom O'Seven Strings is an interesting character associated with the Brotherhood without banners. He will have an important role, I think, in Riverrun, in the Winds of Winter. Could one of his sons be Wex? Wex is a character who appears in the north as a squire to Ramsay Bolton. He sees Bran and Rickon escape and then falls into the hands of House Manderley. And that's how House Manderley know that Rickon is still alive. The fun thing is that Wex can't speak. So they have to basically very slowly work up a way to translate what he's trying to say. And only then did they discover that he's still alive. And that's the point at which they can say to Davos, right, your mission is to go over and collect Rickon. So he's a really important character. I agree, having checked back, that, yeah, the descriptions seem quite similar, and there is a certain irony to the son of a singer being mute, and one does wonder whether or not you say that this could all be, but without Lord Botley knowing, is it possible that they are mute because of a rather cruel jape, or not jape is the wrong word, but a way to try and punish somebody like the actual father by making sure that their son can't speak, let alone sing. I don't know. It's possible. I don't think this is something George Martin has specifically tried to draw to our attention. So it's one of these things where we might, I think we're free to speculate, but I don't think there's a deliberate working through there from George R. R. Martin. Let's go to Commander Ray. Good evening, Robert and Dan. There is a theory about how the Weirwoods were once green, which, considering the use of green in green seer, green men, etc., it is an interesting idea. What is your take on this theory? And if it is true, that would imply, I think, two things. One of them being that the others are connected to the trees in more ways than just coming from the power of the children, assuming the show is right about their origins, and could imply that they can use it too. They do seem remarkably informed for undead. And also that the old god magic can be manipulated or even controlled, perhaps leaning into Euron's plan to become a god. Well, I don't know about the theory about that them used to be green, but I'll happily talk a little bit about the idea that the others are connected to the trees, because if you go to the prologue to A Dance with no, a Game of Thrones book one, then you will find that when the others appear, they come out from the trees. So this is the first image we have, is them coming out from the trees. And whenever we're told about them, it's about connection with the trees. So we are being encouraged to think of them as being connected to the trees. The TV show had a connection across the Weirwood trees. It was underplayed, or not clearly explained, but the way that they were trying to do it was that they were created. The Night King on the TV show was created by dragonglass in the heart in front of a weirwood tree, and then was uncreated by dragonglass in the heart in front of a weirwood tree. So that connection to a weirwood tree was supposed to be clear and strong. It's the kind of thing that you think may have come from George R. R. Martin, a kind of a detail that might have come from George R. R. Martin. They didn't really do much about that in the show. They didn't explain motivations for the others at all. But yeah, I can see there are hints here that there is a connection between the two of them. I did like this idea, building again on what was on the show, that the reason why the others or the Night King could kind of intercept Bran's thoughts was because he was using the same kind of mechanism, green seer mechanism, as Bran, but a twisted / warped version, which kind of echoes what we know from the books in terms of the others seem to be able to control people, dead bodies, in a way that skin changes can control live bodies. And so there's a kind of a warped version of that going on, which does make you wonder if their origin story was something along the lines of they were created by the Children of the Forest. This is speculation from the books, not the show. If they were created by the Children of the Forest as a way to fight against men, using men's numbers against them, stronger than men, etc., then if they used a first man who was a green seer, perhaps by accident, in order to do that, in order to create the first others, then they might have given them a warped version of green seer abilities. So I like this theory. It kind of holds up for me, that it means that the others have some kind of magical powers that mirror in a warped way the magical powers that green seers have. Martin S saying, asking about Stannis Baratheon's offer to legitimize Jon Snow. Um, what happens when the throne is contested? Or in yeah, what happens when the throne is contested, such as the situation in Game of Thrones after the death of King Robert, or in House of Dragons after King Viserys, when one or some of the contenders legitimize a bastard, but not all of them do. My guess would be that the legitimization would be contingent upon that contender for the throne that legitimizes the bastard winning. So what is the role here for legitimizing bastards in a situation where there is not a clear ruler or king? So only a king, we're told, can legitimize a bastard. Stannis says that he's king, so he says that he can legitimize Jon. Robb says he's king, so he says that he can also legitimize Jon. King Targaryen kings many times have legitimized bastards. So, what happens if somebody who says that they're king but actually isn't king legitimizes somebody? Well, that legitimization is therefore only recognized by those parts of the world that recognize that person as king, is the short answer. So, if Stannis were to legitimize Jon, then the Lannisters would still view him as being a bastard. That's the broad outline of it, and that situation would Jon would legitimize so long as he was within that part of the world that Stannis controlled. Lady Sophia Valarion saying, "Hi Robert, I just followed you on Twitter. You are my professor of all things A Song of Ice and Fire." Well, thank you. I hugely appreciate that, and thank you for following me on Twitter. Yeah, if you want to, I'm on a lot of different kind of things like this. So I'm on X, Twitter. You can find me on TikTok. I'm going to start uploading things on there again. I'm on Facebook. Don't do much on there, but and Instagram. I'm on lots of places. So yeah, go and have a look for me. Actually, if you're currently watching me on X, hi, good to see you. I know that quite a few people do watch these live streams over on X, so I see you and thank you for watching. A Son of Ice and Fire saying, hello, Robert. After watching your recent video about Harrenhal, that's the one I released a couple of days ago, I'm curious as to what it will happen to it by the end of A Song of Ice and Fire. Personally, I think a really cool idea would be to give the castle to the Night's Watch. I don't know for certain what will happen, but I do believe that Westeros will survive the long night, and perhaps the Wall will be destroyed by the others. I believe that once the others have been defeated, the Night's Watch could be reworked into an organization that protects and serves the small folk throughout the realm, rather than just at the Wall, sort of like a medieval police force, and their headquarters could be Harrenhal. The Harrenhal is infamous for being so large it would take an army to maintain, and the Night's Watch are known for having an entire section of their forces, the stewards, dedicated to maintaining Castle Black. Is it possible? What do you think will happen to Harrenhal at the end of the story? Well, I love this idea. The idea of the Night's Watch aren't needed at the Wall anymore, so the Night's Watch need something else to do so they can look after the small folk. I think that's fantastic. I don't think that things will become that uh, wonderful and happy, but it's entirely possible. I think depending on exactly how the situation in the north ends, maybe there will still be a need for a Night's Watch in some way, shape, or form. The idea that Harrenhal is given over to the Night's Watch, I think in the light of the extra levels of quite how weirwoody it is, if we have King Bran and if we have the Weirwood network having in some way won this war, then I think probably what would happen to Harrenhal is that it could be destroyed and handed back over to the Weirwoods. That would, I mean, a nice way. George R. Martin doesn't write like this, but a nice way to kind of show that might be that it gets flattened in some way, and then a character just sees a Weirwood sapling appearing, coming up through the ashes. That kind of thing, maybe. Julian saying on a Song of Ice and Fire, asking about the Traveller's Guides. Are they available yet on Patreon? I did answer this a little bit earlier. That's the first place they will be made available, and that will be the other side of House of the Dragon. And a question about the Lord of the Rings. Would you consider making a video about the Druidine? Yes, I will do. I definitely will at some point. I think realistically, when Rings of Power is on, that's going to be on just the other side of House of the Dragon. I will focus on topics that are covered by that, not just breakdowns of what happens in Rings of Power, but what happens in the Legendarium, in issues connected with that, if that makes sense. If people are Googling the Doors of Durin, for example, then I will make a video about the Doors of Durin. Martin S. It was, as I thought, about a king legitimizing a bastard. Legitimization requires the authority where you are of the king during the legitimization. Yeah, absolutely. You said it far more eloquently than I could. Levac saying, I think the best plan for Harrenhal would be to settle it with several families, give one tower each to different families, and grow the infrastructure into a small city. Great idea. And a couple of other random questions to finish off. So now's a good time to drop any more questions you have into the chat. I will pick up as many as I can. A couple more random questions. Commander Ray saying, I had an idea for a series of streams or videos you could do. You could go through the story of A Song of Ice and Fire chapter by chapter, a deep analysis of each. It would be a long series, over 300 episodes. It'd be a lot of fun to do. Yes, I agree, it would. And I have definitely considered it. It's one of the things on my list, actually, for this channel, IDG Live, making them a conversation, have a different person on each week talking through different things, not just the Song of Ice and Fire, but I thought maybe we could start with The Hobbit chapter by chapter, something along those lines. I thought that would be quite fun, getting different voices in here just to give different perspectives on some of these books. And Ranabir Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. Happy election day and happy Eric Ten Hag contract extension day. Yeah, absolutely. In Tolkien's Legendarium, we read about the Dagor Dagarath, the last and final of all battles, where as the world, elves and Valar grow weary, Morgoth escapes from the timeless void for one final battle. You had a video published earlier this year around what counts as part of Tolkien's Legendarium. And since I interpret this concept as part of the canon, I want to ask you, why is it that Turin Turambar should be selected to be the one to deal the final blow to Morgoth? Surely if it's about retribution for the total pain and suffering dealt to that family alone, it should be Hurin who gets the last laugh in the end, right? Let me know your thoughts on it. Yeah, so this is Dagor Dagarath is the final battle in Tolkien's world. And it's not written as a thing which has happened. It's a thing which the elves believe will happen. It's something that Tolkien toyed with, whether or not he would include it. He did like this kind of Ragnarok kind of idea, and also obviously with his very Catholic mindset, then this idea of a final battle that also C.S. Lewis played with this idea. So there's a lot of influences into this, but and Christopher Tolkien also, when he was putting together the Silmarillion, umming and ahhing about whether to include this or not. But it's there in the wider Legendarium. And Morgoth, the original opposition, the kind of Lucifer figure really in all of this, he escapes, is released, and has a final battle and a final confrontation. And the person who kills him is this character from the First Age, a human called Turin Turambar. Now, he is one of the children of Hurin, which is one of the great tragic stories of the First Age. And a lot of people ask this, why this one character? And Tolkien doesn't ever fully answer that, but the hints are that this isn't about who's the most powerful. This final battle isn't about the ultimate champion of good against the ultimate champion of evil. It's none of that business. Nor is it about full retribution. This is the person who has suffered the most. nor is it about full representation. Like this is the one representation of all of elf or humankind or whatever. But Turin is a great fighter, and Turin did suffer hugely. And Turin does represent a huge part about what happened more broadly. So it's, although Tolkien doesn't explain it fully, this is supposed to be a satisfying end. And whereas a lot of the other characters who you could say have some kind of that they have some kind of possible role, you could claim that maybe they should be the ones to do this. They have an ending of some kind of their own. For the elves, they just carry on. They may die, but they do come back. So they have some kind of resolution. Uh, for a lot of the humans, have some kind of resolution. Turin doesn't really. He just is there with his whole story being tragedy heaped on tragedy, and then he dies amidst tragedy. And so it's almost like this one character gets his resolution to the story. That's how I interpret it anyway. I know other people interpret it in different ways, but that's how I've always done it. It's not that he's the greatest. He's not that he's the most powerful. It's not that he's got personally the greatest claim. It's that this allows him an end to the story, and he does meet all of these other kind of categories and criteria. Okay, let's have a look through the chat. I've got a few questions here. Jewel Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Matthew Stewart, how do you feel the showrunners will handle Adam's journey to the Isle of Faces? I fear they may omit it entirely or just leave it mysterious. Yes, so I wish I knew, is the honest answer. So Adam Velaryon, who we have now met on the show, will become a dragon rider, and he will, for reasons we do not know, decide to pay a visit to the Isle of Faces. He's one of only two people we know who visit the Isle of Faces, the other being Howland Reed. He lands his dragon there. He spends a bit of time. He leaves. He heads to a battle, and he promptly dies. Now, this is very frustrating, but how are they going to handle it? I think they won't show us the Green Men and all the secrets of the Isle of Faces. I think that is something George R. Martin will keep for his own revelation in the books. That's just my gut instinct. So I think they probably will show him landing and they'll show him coming out. What will be the interesting thing is why he goes there. There's at the moment no particular correlation between him or House Velaryon or the Dragon and Sea Smoke and the Isle of Faces or the Weirwood Network. There's no clear and obvious reason going on here. So I think that's the first thing. Why does he go there? And then the second thing is, are we going to get anything of what he learned? So they have to, I think, show us that first one. And maybe they will link this in with Harrenhal in some way. Maybe they will link this in with Daemon. If Daemon can be there suddenly starting to believe in the power of this, which he probably will if he's hanging around in Harrenhal for a while, then maybe he's going to suggest it. What I hope doesn't happen, but could, given the way that they have done seasons 1 and 2, is that this is just an accident. It's not intentional. I could certainly see a possibility where he's flying across Westeros. He sees Aemond on Vhagar in the distance, and he has to, maybe Vhagar catches him with a sidelong glance. He manages to escape, but then just has to crash land down on there for a bit, and he didn't mean to go there, and when he's better, he can fly off again. They might do that route because that's a route they've gone for a few different things so far as not intentional, but this is just how it happens. So I wish I knew. And I think we'll probably know a bit more when we get to know a little bit more about Adam Valion. Live Chill Life saying, and that was your first super chat, actually, I think, Matthew. So thank you very much for that. Live Chill Life saying, is there any population on Dragonstone besides the castle and staff? I saw all those people coming and going from the port in episode 2. Well, in the book, yes. In the book, there's a port village with an inn at least, and there are various other. It's not a huge island, but it's an island large enough to have other settlements rather than just the castle. On the TV show, on the original Game of Thrones TV show, they just showed the island as basically a castle on rocks. So they, in order to kind of establish something of a consistency between the original show and House of the Dragon, I think that although they've tried to make it look a bit bigger, and they've shown the port down there, and I think there were a couple of buildings down there as well, they've not really shown there being much else going on. The thing is, in the book, particularly when we're talking the dragon seeds, what it says is that there were lots of people who claimed that they were dragon seeds, and this was understood because then there were people living down in the villages of Dragonstone who had Targaryen visitors, and the Targaryens still believed in the lordly right to the first night, and things like that. So it is a difference between the book and the show on this one. Bonnie Lorraine saying, what do you think about the Winds of Winter being released after this season? I would love it to. I really hope it is. I have given up estimating when the Winds of Winter will be released and finished. I see no evidence at the moment, however, that it is very close to being finished. How close it is? Well, the information we've had from George R. R. Martin, and George R. R. Martin's been very clear throughout, he will tell us when it is finished. We won't have to be reading runes. We won't have to be trying to interpret things on his blog post. He will be very clear. He will write a blog post saying, I have finished writing The Winds of Winter. So we don't have to be looking for all these clues. It's fun. I do it too. Don't worry. But how far is he? Well, 18 months ago-ish, then he said in a couple of different ways he was about 75% of the way through. About 6 months or so ago, he said that he was about the same as he was then. I was about to say he had made no progress. He had made progress in writing things, but in terms of how far through the process, he was still about the same way through. So he would have to write faster than he's written at any point so far in order to get this finished this year. And I don't think that's looking likely. He could have done, but he hasn't said anything. He said last year was, I forget the exact words, but he said professionally it was something like disastrous. And he said that this next year, this was earlier in the year, he was saying this year, next year, 2024, was looking about the same. And that wasn't about TV shows, that had to have been about writing. So, yeah, I'd love the idea. And I wish I could give you a slightly more optimistic view on this one, but I haven't seen anything recently from George R. R. Martin that suggests he's close to finishing. But that was your first super chat. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Fernando Bimitra, if they cut Adam going to the Isle of Faces altogether, can we riot, please? Yes, you have my permission to riot. We have to have him going there. I would prefer him just in the distance, dropping down to the Isle of Faces, spending a bit of time, and then coming back up and us knowing absolutely nothing about it. as long as it's there, I would prefer that to them completely leaving out. I don't think they will leave it out, um, but I think they know they will have to have a long, hard think about how they handle that. Okay, and let's have a quick flick through. HWI Will saying, "Have you ever thought about the falling star that Dunk puts on his shield at the tourney at Ashford may allude to his heritage as a Dane?" It's possible. It's possible. Yeah, um, it's not something I've given huge amounts of thought to, I have to admit, but yes, it's definitely possible. Carl Kostnark saying, when he finishes, it will still take about 6 months to edit / print the book. So if it isn't done by June or July, you have to look to the following year. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a valid point. I mean, we come back to talk about this for obvious reasons quite a lot. But um, when this is done, this will be and published. This will be one of the publishing events of the decade. This is the kind of thing that bookshops, that loads of bookshops are really hard pressed at the moment. And this is the kind of thing that is guaranteed sales for them. And we will have bookshops opening at midnight so that people can come and buy stuff. Things like that. It's going to be huge. And the publishers will know this. We will start getting hints of this coming out because they'll have to be buying advertising slots on things like that. The print run itself, they will have to be putting in massive orders for things. That will take a long time. Translation, I don't know if it's just going to come out in English straight away or whether they're going to try and translate it. The audiobook alone will take a long time. Um, just well, first of all, they've got to hire somebody because Roy Dotrice, who narrated the audiobooks before, sadly passed away a few years ago. But the I think A Dance with Dragons is something like 50 odd hours of spoken material. That's a long time to record, a long time to edit, and this book is going to be even longer than that. So there's a huge amount of work that's going to go into this. It's not even when he says it's finished. Then the editing process might well start. He might well say, "I've finished my bit, but I'm now sending it to the editor." They'll have to make decisions about it's not all going to fit in one book because it's going to be 1,600 pages long. What are they going to do? Are they going to publish it in two parts? They're going to publish them at the same time. There's a lot of decisions they're going to be having to make. Kaziglu Bay saying, "Did you notice that Laris was apparently at the brothel when Aegon walks in?" Yeah, I think that was actually the first question I answered here on this one. Which is absolutely fine. I don't expect everyone to be here for the entire live stream. I did not notice this when it happened. I rewatched the episode before this. I again didn't notice it. I'm just probably not very observant, but I know lots of people did see it. He is there. He's also there in the background in that scene when Gwaine Hightower and Alicent, or when Kristen Cole asks for the favor from Alicent, and he's there in the background of that scene as well. Feel free to keep an eye out for other moments where he's just lurking in the background because I feel sure that there are more that we just haven't spotted yet. Nicole Nark, what plot do you think they'll contribute to Laris? I don't know what you mean by which plot they'll contribute to him. I think the interesting one will be what's his true motivations, because I think we don't yet know that. Because the Angel saying, "I wish the Targaryens actually had purple eyes in House of the Dragon, especially with the eyes being so important to the whole story." Yeah, I can understand that. I think this goes all the way back to the fact that Emilia Clarke, I think she struggled with the contact lenses or something along those lines. That's not me blaming Emilia Clarke. I think there was some condition or something which meant that didn't really work, and so they decided not to go with them for the original TV show, and so they've just not gone with them ever since then. April May saying, "No, it's not Laris, but it was supposed to look like him." The other person looked like Helena, etc. They are mummers. Yeah, so I did notice in the previously that there was somebody who looked like Helena. I had to double check that the Helena there, that it wasn't Helena. So yeah, okay. It's possible then. So April May saying that wasn't Laris, it was somebody who's supposed to look like him. So I'll have to have a look for that. And Joe Rose saying 100% he's in the shadows. Laris, yeah, absolutely always in the shadows. And I think with that, I'm going to start drawing this one to a close. But we have got another. Tomorrow, there'll be another Lord of the Rings video coming out on the main channel, which I can't remember which one that might be. This one might be Is the One Ring sentient, which is a question I get asked a lot. So I thought I'd just go ahead and answer it. Then we've got another video coming out. I did Are Those Dany's Dragon Eggs? So if that whole what's going on with the dragon egg situation has confused you at all, what happened in the books, what's going on the show, how do these match up? I've done a video on it, and that's going to be coming out on Saturday. Then we're back here on Sunday on this channel, IDG Live. We are back here for a pre-show live stream before episode 4. So if you have got any more questions about the previous episode that we didn't answer here, then feel free to bring them along on there. So I think that's it. I'd love to say, I forgot to say thank you to my patrons. I always try to do that. Patrons, thank you hugely. You are the reason I can do what I do, so I hugely appreciate you. Moderators, you did an amazing job again today. Thank you so much for that. Feel free, if you're there in the chat, to give them a last little bit of love before you go. But if you are watching this back a little bit later on YouTube, then appearing somewhere around here is a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, and I will be back here on this channel on Friday, same time, for the pre-show live stream for episode 4. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.